Russian President Vladimir Putin already put 127,000 troops along a border with Ukraine, and now apparently he's moving in the weaponry and more of them at the Ukraine border as an invasion looks more and more likely. Now, President Biden is considering deploying thousands of U.S. troops to Eastern Europe and the Baltics in response. A move that is very different from his restrained, quote-unquote, do not provoke Putin strategy. Ukraine has now received a second shipment of weapons from the United States as part of defense aid. And all of this comes as Biden's foreign policy perception is still reeling from this summer's disastrous Afghanistan exit. Congressman Michael McCaul, Senator Joni Ernst, calling out the president's current Russia approach.
We're seen as weak right now, but because of President Biden, his comments about that a limited invasion was somehow acceptable and that NATO was divided. This president has made so many concessions with nothing in return. That's why Putin smells weakness.
So far with this administration, we have seen a doctrine of appeasement, and that certainly is not going to deter President Putin and Russia from invading Ukraine.
Joey Jones now, Fox News contributor, Fox Nation host, retired Marine bomb technician. First, I just want to get your top line thoughts.
We have no war. We have no business going to war with Russia when we don't know if our government would ever support our military in doing so. The last 20 years would argue the most we would do is appease some faction of our country that might want war, allow a bunch of folks to die, and then have no resolution at the end. And until our government has shown that it has the political will to see something through, the American people shouldn't support it moving in that direction.
Joey, are there tinges of what we saw, all the heartbreak, all the pain, the loss of our exit from Afghanistan here?
You know, that pain and heartbreak was 20 years in the making. I certainly blame President Biden for how the month of August went out, but I blame pretty much every political leader who had something to say and a vote to cast over the last 20 years for how the war ended. We had a little bit of a tail wagging the dog situation where our democracy is amazing, but with every midterm and every presidential election is an opportunity to take the status quo, turn it on its head, and campaign on it. And the American people kind of followed that, and that's not how we should do war in this country. And I'm not trying to be overly critical or overly pessimistic, but you know, look at the current situation, right? So we're going to put troops in other countries, probably to posture against Russia a day too late, and also to let those other countries know, hey, we'll have troops there, so they probably won't come for you next. I don't know that means we're gonna send those troops into Ukraine and fight Russia, but what it probably means, we're sending a lot of weapons to Ukraine, and now Russia's talking about doing some sort of a Russian-friendly government. I mean, are we about to start a proxy war, a Ukrainian civil war? Is that really what we're about to do?
Well, the Russians
record
today
on proxy wars isn't any better.
Are denying that. And, you know, one of the comparisons that I've been reading about is the Taliban certainly didn't care how we were pulling out. They took full advantage.
That's right.
The terrorists who killed our 13 Americans didn't care. And perhaps Putin doesn't care how we handle it either. I mean, we were scurrying, trying to get our people out of there over the weekend. It felt eerily familiar in that sense. A New York Times piece with this: President Biden is considering deploying several thousand U.S. troops as well as warships and aircraft to NATO allies in the Baltics and Eastern Europe. The move would signal a major pivot for the Biden administration, which up until recently was taking a restrained stance on Ukraine, out of fear of provoking Russia into invading. In a meeting on Saturday at Camp David, Pentagon officials presented the president with several options that would shift American military assets much closer to Putin's doorstep. We're watching this in real time now, and strategy is what in this case?
Well, here's the deal. When you stand in front of the world and say something as stupid as a minor incursion is okay, this is a price you have to pay afterwards. And just God forbid that price include American blood. That's how I feel about it. Posturing is a military strategy. It's one that's worked well for us. JFK probably did it best in the most recent years with the blockade in Cuba. But posturing means that you're willing to go the next step, but hopefully smart enough to not have to. I don't know if this is posturing or just straight reactionary. We've got to do something because that speech last week was that bad. the truth is, this isn't a 2022 problem. This is multiple years in the making. I mean, we saw what happened with Crimea. We saw that Russia invaded Georgia. How we've handled everything along the way builds up to how this plays out. And I don't know what Russia's. This is chess, and I play checkers. I go out, take bombs apart, and shoot the bad guy in front of me. You know, I don't know how this plays out, but I can tell you as an American and a voter, I'm beyond frustrated.
Look, it could spread. China now looking across at Taiwan. I mean, if they start to put ships in the water, if they start to do the things that we're starting to hear about right now and reporting on, I mean, it isn't just about Russia, and that's the point. Afghanistan and the way that we handled it in such a bloody, horrible end wasn't just about us in Afghanistan. The world was watching. The world.
I'm 35, and I'm old enough to remember when we used to champion winning wars, and that was a long time ago, I guess. Now we talk about how do we get out of this situation, and I'm okay with that, but at least have a plan. It doesn't seem like this president has one.
Can we talk just a moment, though, about how this is being handled and what effect that has on the strategy? Because we know with Afghanistan, the president had generals around him, and then after all the hearings on Capitol Hill, he went his own way. They were telling him one thing, he decided to go another way. Is that how that plays out? I mean, you have served, and you know that when the call comes from on high, you go do your job. And the commander-in-chief goes to the generals, and we didn't do that with Afghanistan. Are you concerned about that happening here?
I'll tell you what I'm most concerned about is the world didn't need to see, and quite frankly, as Americans, we didn't need to see a situation where we have to grill our generals to find out that the president wasn't telling the truth about their own advice. Oof. To see that much of our cabinet, of our leadership, of the men and women who decisively send our troops to war for a righteous cause at that much of odds with each other. And that's what Russia saw, that's what China saw, and that's what the American people saw.
Wow. Joey Jones, always great to have you in focus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.